Now let's move towards the next part of the poem, which is part 4. Here we see that the horrors of war and the pathetic conditions of women are presented. How those women suffered in many ways, in diverse ways. So, and we also find the use of the word easy, which mentions that revisiting one's memories is not an easy thing. Reliving those past times is not an easy thing. Here in this part, we also see that whenever there was a Pakistani soldier, how frightened those Bangladeshi women used to get just by catching the gaze of a Pakistani soldier. Section 4. Why call any of it back? Easy enough to descend with your mother, down and down hard stone steps. How I loved, she says, to watch her, yes, reach forward to touch the sun-ambered softness of the bride's sari. Grandmother retwines around her body, yes, your eyes dazzled by the diamond's many-chambered light. It shined so. Mother says, though it's not you she is speaking to anymore. So in the first stanza of part 4, the poet says, it is not easy enough to descend into the memory lane and revisit all those past moments which you had lived once. And she also talks about her mother, who is at present with her. In this poem, again we see that this stanza is divided into 2 sections, just like other stanzas of previous sections of the poem. So the 2 sections that we find here are past and present. She sees her mother, who is at present living with her, living with the poet, and then she again recalls the time when her mother was a child, an 8-year-old girl, and was with her grandmother. She again recalls that moment when her grandmother used to take bath in that pond, and her mother as a little girl used to follow her. Then she talks about the dazzling of the diamond, which has many chambered light. She gives a reference to that prism. Whenever the sunlight passes through that prism, it divides into different sections. So that's what the poet has mentioned here, that there are so many chambers of this light, and though it's not you she is speaking to anymore. Then again, coming back to the present, she says, it seems as if my mother is speaking to someone else, because she is totally engrossed in her thoughts. So the softness of the bride's sari, grandmother retwines around her body. This line symbolically refers to the soft and tender thoughts of that woman. In the next stanza of this 4th section, she writes, caught as she is in this reeling backward, 1971, and a Bangladeshi woman catches the gaze of a Pakistani soldier. Through rain-curved palm trees, her sari is torn from her. She bathed the same way each time, mother says. The torn woman curls into green silence. First, she would fold her sari, then dive in. Yes, the earth green with rain, the water green. Then she would wash her face until her nosepin shined. Ahare, how it shined! His eyes green. Then she would ask me to wash her back. The torn woman, a helix of blood. Then she would rub cream into her beautiful skin. The soldier buttoning himself back into khaki, yes. So here in this section of the poem, in this 8th stanza, we see that the torn sari symbolizes victimization and loss of agency, emphasizing the impact of violence during wartime. This section also explores the interviewer's personal motives in researching her family's history and her family's culture and tradition. And she also talks about the challenges of maintaining objectivity. While the poet is talking about all those issues that had happened in the past, while she is talking about a Bangladeshi woman being molested by a Pakistani soldier during that war time, she feels that it was a challenge to maintain the objectivity while recording the history, culture, tradition, and all those experiences of the women survivors of that war. This section of the poem illustrates the personal and painful challenges of uncovering and confronting historical trauma within familial as well as national contexts. So she creates a picture where she presents a woman who was molested by a khaki clad soldier, and then she also creates another picture where she presents that routine of her grandmother and mother going to the pond, taking a bath, coming back to the house, and the little girl following her mother. So that was a routine life which is presented as one picture, while there is another picture where we find another woman who also goes to that pond and she was molested by one of the soldiers. The color green is mentioned here again and again. Earth green with rain, water green, and his eyes green. The green which symbolizes tranquility, which soothes human mind and soul. The green which is also considered a color of rejuvenation. So here when she presents that green in the eyes of that man, we can understand it in two ways. The first, there is a reflection of the greenery in the water. There is a reflection of that greenery on the soil. There is the reflection of that greenery in the eyes of that man. Another thing, another way of talking about that green color is everything that appeared green got a reflection, got an image in the eyes of that man also, who was khaki clad and could not differentiate between right and wrong. Now we have the last section of the poem, that is the part 5. Here we see that the narrator's or the poet's thoughts trail back to her roots. She starts by describing a significant distance between two voices, the one she has left in her homeland, that is Bangladesh, and the other one which she has discovered in this new country, that is America, where she is living. And these two voices are represented as two oceans that are apart. And the distance between these two lands, the distance between these two voices gets softened by the phrase like "but still," which indicates a connection between two cultures, between two places, and between these two voices. So when she writes, "Two oceans between you," but still you can see her running a finger along the granite counter in the sun-spilled kitchen, waiting for the tea to boil before she drives past old West Texas oil fields still bright with bluebells. "But tell me," she asks, "why couldn't you research the war from here? Gather these materials, these undrowned ceremonies." Tea poured into a cup, a woman, stepping lightly across green field into a green pond. "But don't tell her the country of her birth. Became a veined geography inside you, another body inside your own. Oh, Ma," she sobs, "I miss her so." You open the door to step out to the concrete veranda. "Look, the moon is an ivory." Gutting another pond across which the reflection of a young girl's braid ripples. "Tell me," you say, "about 1971. we see a detailed description of someone running a finger along the granite counter in the kitchen. And the narrator feels so close to that person. So we can assume that the person who is there in the kitchen and is running a finger on that granite counter must be the mother of that poet. The poem's structure creates a feeling of both distance and closeness. Here she presents the picture where she has her mother. Both of them are sitting together, enjoying tea and discussing the research which Tarfia Faizullah was about to begin. The research about the liberation war of Bangladesh. The woman, the mother, she asked her daughter, she asked the poet to stay there, to stay in the present place and do the research from there only. Read about the stories, listen to all those stories, talk to her and do it from there only. What's the use of, she says, what is the use of going so far away? So Tarfia Faizullah as a woman feels that don't tell the country of her birth became a veined geography inside you. That the country of her birth where this woman, this mother was born, now it has just become a part, a place in the map of the world because she had experienced all those pains, plights and sufferings of the women. That is why she wants her daughter to stay there at the present place and do the research from there only. So in this section of the poem, we see that she blends the kitchen scene with an image of a Texas oil field and shows a deep connection to the landscape. Here the term tea is a recurring theme and the undrowned ceremonies suggest rituals that haven't been forgotten. Thus, these rituals that are still alive, they create a kind of a continuation, they also create a sort of a connection between the two places that are the present place and the past place. The poem also talks about the narrator's internal struggle, the struggle to balance the personal motives with the objective research. It was a struggle where she had to face the situation when her mother did not want her to go to that place for the research. It was a struggle where she wanted to collect the exact material, the real material, and also she wanted to keep the research as objective as possible. In this last section of the poem, we see a generational link is presented and also we feel that there is a constant personal quest for the history of the family. Let us talk about different themes that are presented in this poem. We find the theme of war and violence, we find the theme of memory and trauma, as well as innocence and loss. Let us begin with the last one. The theme of innocence and loss is presented by showing the 8-year-old girl in this poem. She is presented as a child who has experienced the horrors of war, who has seen that hard time in her life, and this little girl represents all those children of that era. So a contrast between innocence and the horrors of war is presented here. Then the next theme, that is memory and trauma, the lasting effect of traumatic events on the minds of individuals, are presented here in this poem. Past events always come forward to shape the present of a person. Past events always get together to create the identity of a person. So here these events that are so much traumatic, they come forward to create the identity of those war survivors. Then the next theme is war and violence, where we see how brutally the civilians were killed and how women faced violence at different levels, not only in the war field but at so many levels of their lives. We can say that men who were soldiers who fought in that war, they were killed once only. But the women who were a part of that war, directly or indirectly, they were killed many times. They had faced many deaths. They were killed as soldiers, they were molested and thus killed as a woman. They were tortured in different ways. And later on, when Bangladesh got its independence, their efforts were not recognized properly. This was also a sort of a death of their efforts and hardships. Now let's talk about different symbols that are used in this poem. We find the symbol of a pond and water, we find the symbol of sari and diamond, and also the green color, which has been talked about repeatedly. Pond and water. Water symbolizes life, it symbolizes cleansing and rejuvenation. It also symbolizes memory here, because the memory of poet's mother has connected with that memory of past life when she used to follow her mother to the pond. Sari and diamond represent culture, tradition, and a person's cultural identity. The ethnic identity is presented with the help of these two objects, sari and diamond. Next is green color, that has been talked about again and again and presented in different stanzas. This symbolizes nature as well as hope. At the end, we can say that Seam, which is a collection of poems, it presents personal and historical stories. These stories illustrate trauma, pain, as well as the resilience of different generations. The poem 1971 highlights the memories of trauma, and it also presents the hardships of women of that time. At the same time, this poem shows how those women bravely faced the circumstances. This poem emphasizes that war leaves lasting imprints on the minds and souls of human beings. War leaves such impressions on the mind of people that could never be erased. That is all for today's class. Thank you so much. We will connect again in some other lectures. Thank you.